Awesome. All right. So thank you everyone for joining this. Once again, my name is Lolita Atkins. I'm the program manager at the Undergraduate Research Center. I also work with the NSF LSAMP Camp and MURPPS programs, as well as the IIFH program. And today's panel discussion is how a master's or a doctoral degree can accelerate a career in mentoring and leadership. This is part 2 of the series. We're super excited to introduce to you our guests who will share their stories, and we'll start first with Caitlyn Carter.
Good afternoon, good evening. How many people are we looking at? 25 people. So I like to look at faces. So let's put on the gallery and let me scan really quickly. All right, beautiful smiles, even some great photos. No worries, no worries. So I actually discovered, I'll give a little background first. I was born in Savannah, Georgia, and I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. So I was raised with some Southern values, and I moved to California when I was 10. And it was at that point that I realized some of my Southern values were not applicable to my new environment, right? So when I say Southern values, it's culture, Southern culture, that was not only a part of my upbringing, it was a part of my identity. And growing up in South Central Los Angeles, I found that I'm a twin, an identical twin, and I have an older brother. So the three of us transitioned from Savannah, Georgia to Los Angeles. And I was 10 at the time. This is 1979. I know I'm dating myself. And but it was at the height of the crack and gang epidemics in Los Angeles. And the reason why I said my Southern values were not applicable to the new environment is because we were socially outcast from many of our environments that we grew up in. And so I often wondered, why don't I fit in, right? I'm living in predominantly Black communities, but I still feel like I don't fit in. From an educational standpoint, when I moved to California, I had no knowledge of the process of tracking. I was tracked according to my test scores. Give me a thumbs up, use your emoji, tell me if you know what tracking is or if you've heard of tracking. Don't tell me if you know what it is, but just give me a thumbs up with your emoji if you've heard of tracking. That was a process in the early 80s in California where the results of your test scores basically determined your future. So if you underperformed on certain tests, then you were either on the college route or the vocational route, meaning you were supposed to get a job, I guess. You weren't qualified to go to college based on your test scores. You were supposed to go get a job after high school, right? And so I was on the vocational track. And while I had an interest in higher education, no one in my family had achieved higher education status, meaning I was the first generation college student by the time I got to college. In any case, I ended up becoming a student athlete in high school. In fact, I was a 3-sport all-city athlete, basketball, football, and track. And I thought that was my avenue, exclusively my avenue to college. So I didn't have grades. I ended up attending 6 community colleges after high school before I went to UC Berkeley. Upon landing admissions to UC Berkeley as a transfer student, I was dismissed after my first year. But it was at Berkeley that I realized I needed to fine-tune my critical thinking, critical writing, and my analytical skills. And Berkeley was the perfect place for me to do that. As a result, however, I started really thinking about what I wanted to study, and I ended up changing my major 3 times. But I stumbled upon a discipline called Interdisciplinary Studies. It was in the College of Letters and Science. And it was an opportunity to kind of create your own area of study. And you choose an advisor and you write an undergraduate thesis. As a result of being tracked, and at the time, things like underrepresented minority, the term did not exist, but at risk was one of those terms that existed at the time. And I was considered at risk. And I thought to myself, I'm not at risk for anything. So why am I in that category? Where did all this come about? All this tracking and IQ tests and things of that sort. Hence, that's when I discovered the power of research. I thought to myself, who created all these standards to try and assess and evaluate humans from all different cultures and all different backgrounds and all different economic and status and political affiliations and socioeconomic? Who created all this? Well, as a result of writing an undergraduate thesis I did research on the historical foundations of racial bias and intelligence testing. I found that the father of all IQ tests was a gentleman named Sir Francis Galton. Sir Francis Galton, through marriage, was related to Charles Darwin. Anybody heard of the theory of evolution? Charles Darwin, right? Give me a thumbs up if you've heard of Charles Darwin. Of course, because it's taught in the American high school system, if you were part of it, if you were a product of the American high school system. Well, these people, Sir Francis Galton and Charles Darwin, created these standards to establish white male intellectual superiority over other people. And it was at that point that a light bulb came on in my head that I'm nobody's at-risk anything. I am college material. I have a capacity that's beyond their measure, right? And then I stumbled upon African and African American studies courses. Now, I'm from Savannah, Georgia, but Black history and culture and things of that sort were not something that was discussed in my home. But when I started taking African American African studies classes at UC Berkeley, self-discovery kicked in. And so when I found that the first colleges and universities in the world were established in Africa, all right, the first colleges and universities in America was 1636, Harvard University. But the first colleges and universities in the world were established in Africa, 859 AD. 859 AD. So I thought, I'm Black, which means I can trace my lineage at some point to Africa. Now, at the time, I didn't use the term trace my lineage. That's something that I acquired. That language is something that I acquired really as an adult, a working professional. But I knew that I'm born in Savannah, but I knew my family weren't from Savannah. They're from Africa, somewhere in Africa, right? And so that gave me a sense of belonging beyond the standards, beyond the tools that were established to kind of determine this intellectual superiority. And that sense of self carried me through not only undergrad, but grad school and into a professional career in college administration. But I give you that context or that foundation to say, research uncovers truth. In my case, it exposed truth about me. That I was nobody's pawn. I was nobody's manual laborer. And what I mean by that is from a vocational track, in high school, I had to take like typing, 10 key adding machine, how to write checks. Some of you are nodding your heads. I remember it's a generational thing, quite frankly, because some of these courses may not be taught in high school, but I sure did. Wood shop, auto shop, machine shop, metal shop, plastics. These are all classes that I was offered in high school. Then you had the typing 1 and 2, 10 key adding machine. And I thought there's got to be a better way. Now, I'm not shunning those professions. Neither am I shunning the fact that this was an avenue that I was directed towards. What I am saying is, via my self-assessment and self-analysis, I should have had the opportunity to pursue what I had an interest in, all right? So as I look at Lolita, I'm not quite sure if I went overboard in my introduction, but 2 minutes. Okay, so I ended up going to, after finishing at UC Berkeley, I did a master's at Michigan State University in higher education administration with an emphasis in student affairs. I knew after I graduated from Berkeley, I taught high school, I taught elementary school, and I knew that I wanted to be in the education profession. But I also knew that teaching didn't pay. I mean, it wasn't the kind of lifestyle that I wanted to live. So I needed an advanced degree. And I knew that in an effort to get what I thought at the time, this was 1991, that I needed to have an advanced degree to put myself in an economic status that I thought was suitable for my family. So I got a master's from Michigan State. I started practicing in '98 after finishing my master's, and I've been in higher ed now for 23 years. I am also currently a doctoral student at UC Davis. So I'm getting my doctorate degree in educational leadership in the Graduate School of Education. Yes, thank you, Antoinette. Antoinette, what's going on? And so here's the reality, you all. As I stated earlier, research uncovers truth. Research is the ability to investigate beyond the here and now. Research is the ability to enhance your understanding beyond measure. In the case of those with doctorate degrees, it also solidifies your name in time. Your dissertation will stand through the test of time, and at any time beyond your existence on Mother Earth, someone can be able to look you up and explore what you've uncovered in the form of research. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to support you all, at least virtually. And I hope to meet some of you in person, if not all of you, once we return to campus. But thank you for having me, Lolita. And I could talk all day, but I'll end there.
Thank you so much, Caitlyn. I appreciate that. And I failed to mention earlier that Caitlyn is the new executive director for the Academic Advising Enrichment Center. So thank you for sharing your story. We'll move right on to Christina Jackson, who is the EOP Retention Specialist at the Center for the Educational Opportunity Program. Christina?
Thank you, Lolita. And Caitlyn, thank you for getting us started. I want to start off by saying some of you came here today to find out if research is something that you can do. And I want to start off with you knowing that the answer is yes, because research is not just dissertations and master's thesis. Research is being curious enough to develop questions and then seeking out resources that allow you to answer them. So for those of you who are wondering if you have what it takes, your being here today is evidence that you do indeed have what it takes to practice research. So that's where research started for me. I started college like Caitlyn as what they called at risk. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and was able to go to college because of a program called the Freshman Academy, which was a pre-college program for students who they did not expect to make it. Unlike a lot of the students who I went to college with, I did actually go to vocational school as a high school student. It was required for students in my community to get a vocation. So before I attended college, I was a dental assistant. And this was something that, you know, since they were creating this opportunity for us, my family was like, yes, dentistry, this is for you. You're going to do this. And I was like, after having a couple of experiences, I wasn't sure that it was something I wanted to do. But my grandmother was the kind of person that you were going to do what she said until you were going to do what you said. And so research became that way for me to say, okay, I got to figure out what I got to convince her that there's something else that I want to be doing. And so I found out that Grand Valley State University had a great psychology program, resonated with her because psychology was an interest for her in school, and started off as a psychology major, did not end up there. But that is where research started for me. Was, I think someone wrote in the chat, me search. It really was me trying to figure out what it was that I was going to do because I didn't want to do what was provided for me. And I will note that for those of you who don't like people telling you what to do, then you better figure out your own questions and know what to do. Because if you don't know what to do, you are only in a position for somebody to have to tell you what to do. So research is definitely one of those ways. I received my bachelor's degree in sociology, and then 5 years later, I went on to receive a master's degree in higher education administration. Research, my first research project was my undergraduate thesis, where I went into stores to look at the age differences in kids' toys. And there are huge gender differences for toys for boys and girls. If you don't believe me, go ahead and check it out. Go visit your local Walmart. My second experience with research was writing my master's thesis, which was about creating a more equitable environment for Black students at predominantly white institutions, because I was a Black student that attended a predominantly white institution. I will also say that I have context now, being at University UC Davis, where there's about 3%. My university had about 14%. And I remember thinking that wasn't large enough. But perspective is everything. So research is also a way to give you perspective. Being able to travel has taught me things that I would not have known otherwise. So I also want to implore you to think about research as not just being things that you find in books or being quantitative, but qualitative research is very, very important and essential. In my current role as a practitioner of student affairs, I use research often as a way to discover best practices when developing requirements for our academic monitoring system. As a student supervisor, and recognizing that the university changes at least every 4 years when you get that new flock of students. And so it's necessary for us to constantly stay up to date about different trends and patterns that are happening nationally, but also with the students at our university. So that is another way that I utilize research. And personally, I am a motivational speaker and creative. And so I'm heavily interested in things involving motivation, courage, identity, and habits. So personally, those are things that I take part in every day by being an audible listener. And so even when I'm just like washing dishes, doing laundry, whatever that is, making sure that I'm not just listening to music, that I'm also listening to information. And that is also another way that I practice research. So I'm so happy to be here with y'all today. I hope that something that one of us will say to you will spark the curiosity for you to start developing the questions that you need for answers. And because every student needs a camp, they need a counselor, they need an advisor, they need a mentor, they need a peer mentor. I would love to serve in one of those roles for you. And so if you are looking forward to that, then stay tuned so you can ask us some questions later. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Christina. I really appreciate that. And if you wouldn't mind, if you can include your email address, if you feel comfortable, in case the students wanted to contact you later, go ahead and drop that in the chat. So next up, we have Christie Navarro, who is the director of the Center for Leadership Learning.
Yes, good evening. Good evening, everyone. I actually prepared some slides, so I'm going to share them with you. And the reason, why I chose to start my talk with these slides is because I'm a visual learner. I'm a very visual person, not just, even just the way I learn, but visuals help me. And so to try and explain my story and my trajectory, since it is, in my opinion, a little unconventional, I thought that, having some imagery might be helpful. So I grew up in Visalia, California. Give me a thumbs up if anyone knows where Visalia is. Maybe a few people, okay. Visalia, I am totally fine. Visalia, at least when I was growing up, was a very small town south of, in the Central Valley, so south part of California. And it's right in the middle of Fresno and Bakersfield. So that's where I grew up, born and raised. It's a very high agricultural area. My family, both my parents, my father and mother's side, either worked out in the fields. My mother's side, my grandfather worked the orange groves until, he left, this earth. And so I come from a very agricultural background. And going through high school, I was not considered college bound. I was not considered college worthy. And even by my high school counselor, I can remember he telling me, go to community college, you can do that and just, then go get a job. And so I never really knew if I wanted to go to college, to be honest with you. Not many of my circle of friends, not many people in my high school went to college. There was always these select few, right? The select few, those top straight A students who, are the ones that got the attention, quite frankly, but my parents had a different plan for me. I didn't have the choice of whether I wanted to go to college. I had to go to college. And growing up and, graduating in 1990, so I'm also, kind of old school and have been around for a while. That was also very different and unique, being, a Latina, and my parents, saying, no, you are going away to college. And so that was really, I think, very unique, to have that type of home environment. Now, my parents didn't go to college, no cousins, I have one older sister. Yes, she went to college as well. So I didn't have really anyone to kind of help me through that transition or even, to survive. So I did manage to graduate high school. And so I did start out as a transfer student at community college. I kind of floundered for about 3 years in community college. And one day my dad sat me down and he's like, look, what are you doing? Are you gonna go to college? Are you transferring somewhere? Because if not, you need to get a job and just get moving, right? And so that scared me enough to say, okay, I'm going, because I knew that's what they wanted. But I'm forever grateful, for that push. I did have a very difficult time as an undergraduate student. I went to transfer to Sacramento State, and I really did have a difficult time. I didn't have, a lot of confidence. I didn't know, about mentoring, getting mentors or asking those questions, especially when I was struggling. And for me, there was just this cloud of shame that I always carried with me when I failed a class, and I failed a lot of them, when I didn't understand, how to read a research article or even understand even what research is. And so I carried that burden with me. I did manage to graduate, and so I am, yes, a first gen college graduate. But when I was thinking about my future, I feel, there's this pattern in my life where I kind of just float into things, or I kind of fall into things. I've never really have been that direct, but I know that some of us think and have these expectations when we think about our future, that it's just this straight line, right? And some of us might even think, okay, by a certain age, I'm going to have this degree, or by this age, I'm going to have a family, or by this age, I'm going to go and buy a home. My life is really more like where it says reality, where it's just all twists and turns and knots and going this direction and then that direction. But I'm grateful for that path. And it really has taught me so much. So I did graduate with a bachelor's degree in psychology. I thought at the time I wanted to go into social work. I spent some time after graduating, went into some volunteer work in a nonprofit with CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates, and I was part of that organization as a volunteer, then moved into case manager. It's an organization that advocates for children who are victims of abuse and are involved in child protective services and going through that whole process. And I realized after 3 years that was not for me. So again, I kind of fell into education because I didn't know what I was going to do. And I, worked in outreach, EAOP. I don't know if some of you are involved with EAOP in the Central Valley. Even then worked for or recruited for Merced even before there was a physical campus. Then I moved on and came back up here and went to work for ACT, the College Admission Testing Organization. So some of you might have taken the ACT. And so I, was a business traveler for 3 years and literally on the road, living out of a suitcase and going to work on an airplane. That's how I got to my job, and that my grandmother never understood that concept, of like, what is it that you do? And so, I kind of just, just kind of floated around. And, then I knew that I wanted to go to grad school. I can't say exactly why, but I just knew that was just something that I did want to accomplish. And so having relocated up here in the Sacramento area, I went into a graduate program. I have a master's in higher education leadership, again with Sacramento State. And this is where the study of leadership entered my life. And I had an 8-year gap between my undergrad and master's degree. I still am on the fence. I will be honest with you, if I'm going to go further with a PhD, there's part of me that wants to. There's part of me that, still working on that confidence and, thinking about, again, the research and, am I able to do this, and I just really struggled with that even in graduate school. And it wasn't until I found, a close-knit circle of friends and just really, again, willing to ask the questions, really to admit when I don't understand something. And, so I was able to make it through that program, and write that thesis and be up at all hours of the night. When I finished my master's degree, I swore to myself that I would never write anything scholarly ever again. So hold that thought, put a pin in that in just a moment. And so when I entered, again, this world of leadership, this is really where I feel that my trajectory really took off. And I'm borrowing this image. I wish I could say I created this, but I didn't. But I feel like this image is what really helps describe how I feel that my career, even my life, has really taken off. So you can see, following this kind of like swirl that keeps rising and rising. And where I put these little stars, it's those moments of when, you are learning something or experiencing something, and you take that with you, and it just, pushes you up to the next level. And those stars for me, represent self-discovery and, understanding more of who I am and the gifts and the strengths that I have. Christina mentioned travel, and that is my passion. Other pre-COVID, right? Going off and even traveling alone and leaving, the country and just going and exploring the world, that has just impacted me so much. Learning and understanding more about what it means to be a leader, what it means to engage in the leadership process, has really, again, catapulted me, to these higher places, if you will. And it has changed my mindset and my worldview. It's funny, this image, because it does say, if you can read it, it says, "Screw up the status quo," which I actually found kind of funny, because I am, and those who work with me in the center know that I am so anti-status quo. I'm always that person to figure out what we can do better, how I can be better, how I can leave a better mark, on the world. And so I really felt that this image really captures that. And finally, again, it's with this area of study of leadership and this where it says leadership for the 21st century. Yes, that is the cover of a book. I mean, one of the most boring covers I know, but when reading this book in graduate school, was one of the first leadership books that I read. And this totally changed my life and changed my view of what it really means to be a leader. Leader is not positional. Leader, is not, a noun. Leadership is a verb. It's something that we do. It's something that we embody. And when I realized that and really took that, to heart, if you will, that is when my life changed. It really, really, truly changed. So it happened a little bit later in life, as I would say, in my 30s, mid 30s. Again, the imagery of the travel and the increase in my confidence, being grateful, and just having that attitude of gratitude every single day. And again, just learning and being open and taking all that information in and just really figuring out, where my next path, where the next journey is going to be. And so it's kind of, again, how I envision sharing my story with you. So again, a little bit unconventional, but the thing about the research too. So how I said I was never going to write anything ever again. Well, wouldn't you know, I'm a part of a research group in my field with other leadership educators across the country. I was invited into that circle, and we are going through a co-inquiry process. And right now we are in the middle of writing issue of a journal in leadership education in my field called New Directions for Student Leadership. And it is frightening. It is difficult. Sometimes it feels like pulling teeth, or I'm kicking and screaming as I'm trying to write and get over this imposter syndrome. So sometimes it might stick with us. It might still linger. But again, if you surround yourself with people who support you and just create that community, then you can get through it. And so I'm so lucky to have that. And maybe I'll send you all a copy, when it's published this coming winter. So that's my story. And same thing, I know I'm over time. I am here for you. Whatever I can do. I love the example of camp, any way that I can help you and be here for you and support you. Please do not hesitate to let me know. So thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for letting me share this time with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Christie. Really appreciate you sharing your story. And for all the students here, I want to tell you, Christie is a great resource, and so is the Center for Leadership Learning. So I am dropping that in the chat. Before you graduate, you need to at least take one of the workshops, the courses. She also has a developmental series for anything leadership, right? So it's something great to add to your resume and also to build your skills. So I do want to put a plug in for that. Christie also put her email address in the chat. So go ahead and copy that down and definitely take advantage. Everyone has offered to be a resource for you. This is what we do, right? So take advantage of that. So moving on, our next guest is Dr. E. Nunez, who is the Associate Director for the Undergraduate Research Center, and they will share their story.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lolita. Thank you, Annalisa, and everyone for having me here today. I see a lot of familiar faces, so that's always great. As Lolita said, my name is E. Nunez. I use they, them, theirs pronouns, and I am the Associate Director for the Undergraduate Research Center. And this is my third year on campus. So my story, I think, well, I'm born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. So anything under like 80 degrees, I get pretty cold. So I'm used to like 120-degree summers, or actually not even summers, just days. So born and raised in Arizona, I grew up in an area called Maryvale in Phoenix. It is one of, not a great neighborhood community, but it was my community. There was a lot going on there, and so I know that's where I got a lot of my street smarts from. And I am now in a place in my life where I can be very proud of that, because I think I, at first, was not proud of where I came from because of the stigma that came along with it when, I told people I went to Maryvale High School or anything like that. So it took me a long time to get to a place to say that I'm proud from being from Maryvale, because it definitely instilled a lot of street smarts into me. So I started out in Phoenix. I always, I should say I was adopted at the age of 13. And I was adopted by my 7th grade social studies teacher, actually. She is someone who I look up to, my bonus mom, Gina. I look up to her. I feel like I owe her a lifetime of debt for giving me a family and giving me a family that loves me and accepts me, and also giving me the gift of an education. Prior to being adopted, college was never something we talked about. I'm the first one that graduated in my biological family from high school. So that day felt like a huge accomplishment, and like that was like my end all be all. But my mom, Gina, had other plans for me. You know, from the first day she came into my life, she told me that college was for me and that I was going to go. And, you know, being the defiant 13-year-old that I was, you know, I told her, I don't have money for that. That's crazy. Like, that's, you know, I don't know. We'll see. And so I ended up applying to all 3 state schools in Arizona: Northern Arizona University, Arizona State University, and the University of Arizona. And if you know anything about rivalries, Kate, and I know you do with Michigan State, but if you know anything about rivalries, I went to the University of Arizona, and I would be Wildcat for life. I, you know, had an amazing time in undergrad. I made up for a lot of, I had to grow up pretty quickly in life, so I made up for a lot of lost time. I'll be real honest. And because of that, I did not do well in college in terms of my GPA, right? I actually have a hard copy of my undergraduate transcripts that I carry with me. I carry it with me in all of my offices that I've worked in, and I will openly share it with students because I graduated with a 2.5 GPA, and I worked my butt off for that 2.5 GPA to be able to get myself to there. And I say that because no matter what your GPA says, it is not an indicator of your success. It is not an indicator of your future. So I put that out there right away for folks. So just know that it is a metric of measurement. It is not the metric of measurement. So just know that. And even if it is one metric, it is highly flawed. But I will get off that soapbox for now. And so at the University of Arizona is where I really tapped into my identity as Latinx, because my upbringing from 0 to 12 to 13 was very different from my upbringing from 13 to present. And so I had to really reconcile a lot with, like, what does it mean to be Latinx from where I came from and then from the family that I was in, because it was still very different, right? And so I joined a historically Latina sorority, Kappa Delta Chi Sorority Incorporated, and that has been one of the best decisions of my life. For the first time, felt like I had an actual community outside of my family, right? I had a community that I can go get, you know, connect with. I have a community that I can lean on. I have a community that I can say, I want to quit school, and they're going to say, no, you're not going to quit school, right? So after undergrad, or I should say during undergrad, I was highly involved in TRIO programs. So, well, I first started as in something called New Start, which is a summer bridge program, similar to, is it STEP on campus? Yeah, similar to STEP on campus, very, very similar to STEP. And so I lived in the residence halls. Folks here call them dorms still, and it's as a res lifer that really like bugs me. But so I lived in the residence halls. I went to classes, did all the good things, and so that really was the catalyst for my just everything, the launching pad for everything. I met my mentors, who I still talk to this day, in that summer of 2003. And so I met them there. I still communicate with them, you know, and so they are definitely people that I still go to till this day. And so through that, I also got involved in student support services, TRIO, those kinds of things. And then, you know, initially I graduated a political science degree, but initially going in, I thought I was going to go to law school because I had read somewhere that the University of Arizona is the #1 school in graduating, or the law school is the #1 school in graduating folks who identify as Latinx, right? And so I also thought a law degree was my way to change my life economically. And so I went on this journey to become a lawyer. And once I got into my upper division courses for my political science degree, I was quickly turned off because I realized that the people that were in our case studies, the people that were talked about as criminals and those kinds of things, looked like me. And they looked like the people that I came and I hung out with. They looked like my cousins, they looked like my tios and tias. And so I was quickly turned off, but my mom, I didn't have an option to change my degree, to be honest. So I decided to, in my senior year, the spring semester of my senior year, I decided that I did not want to go to law school. And so now I had to figure out what my next plan was going to be, and most importantly, how I was going to communicate that to my mother. And so needless to say, I took a lot of time to think about that conversation, but really I went to a mentor of mine, my academic retention specialist from TRIO, and said, I don't want to go to law school. I just want to be able to do what you do every day. Because I was already being a peer mentor and doing all these things. And I said to him, if I can do what you do every day, I'd be so happy. And then he turned to me and said, well, you can. It's called student affairs. And that's when my mind was blown, right? And I was like, yo, you mean I can get paid for putting programming? You mean I can get paid for hanging out with students? You mean I can get paid for doing all this cool stuff? And he was like, yes, you can. And so he set me on my way to look for some student affairs programs. And I was sold. I was absolutely sold. I declared an educational leadership minor, and stayed for an additional year at the University of Arizona to gain some skills and make myself more competitive in terms of my master's degree application. So I got myself a internship at the Dean of Students office. Dr. Keith Humphrey is probably my #1 fan in terms of just anything student affairs, anything in life. I still communicate with him. He is now the vice president for student affairs at San Luis Obispo in SLO. And so he took me on, and I am forever grateful, because that allowed me to get a lot of experience that offset my GPA, right? Because even though I know my GPA is not a measurement of my success and my future, the fact of the matter is that folks look at it and they make the assumptions that they make, right? So I've had to give them other things to look at. And so I honestly only applied to one program because I really did not think I was going to get into graduate school anywhere. And so I applied to Northern Arizona, and by something I got in, and I got my tuition covered 75%. It's now 100%, which I'm a little about, but that's all right. I got 75% of my tuition covered. I got an assistantship in Res Life, and that was my introduction to Res Life. And so my 2 years because it was a 2-year program at NAU, really were the ones that showed me, if I am studying something that I'm really passionate about, then it's gonna be easy, right? In terms of my motivation, in terms of my curiosity, that's always gonna remain there. I'm gonna have rigor and I'm gonna be challenged, but that curiosity and that motivation to continue to learn and develop is always gonna be there, so long as I am tapped into my passion. And I realized that student affairs was my passion. It was a counseling-based program. So I did have to do a 300-hour practicum where I literally saw clients for free under the guise of a licensed psychologist and counselor. And I remember, like Christie, I said the famous words to Dr. Eugene Brown. I said, Dr. Brown, I'm never going to use these counseling skills. I want to go into student affairs. And he was like, come back to me when you actually use your counseling skills. Well, I graduated NAU and I went to Asheville, North Carolina. I went to Asheville, North Carolina in all transparency, I went to Asheville, North Carolina because I needed to find myself. I was, still figuring out what it meant to be adopted. I was still, was going through some personal things. So I was like, I got to get out of Arizona. So I applied to everywhere except Arizona. The closest I applied to was this tiny college called Peace College in Chicago. That was the closest it was that I got to home. I ended up at Asheville, North Carolina, because I wanted something different. And let me tell you, I got different. You know, Asheville, North Carolina is often called the progressive pocket of the South, but it's still the South, right? And so I had as an out, at that time, I was out as a gay person. I identify as trans like now, but at that time I was out as gay. And so I faced some serious culture shock when I was in North Carolina. And so it was difficult, but at the same time, now reflecting on that, I wouldn't change it for the world. I started counseling for the first time out in North Carolina, and that has absolutely transformed my life. And then I got told by my mom, you've been gone too long, and so you need to start thinking about coming back to this side of the country. And my grandmother, who I was really close to, started to get sick. So I went back home, or closest to home that I was going to get, to be able to be there for my family. And so, I was admitted into the EDD program, the Doctorate in Educational Leadership at Cal State Long Beach. Cal State Long Beach is an accelerated 3-year program. Basically, what that means is they expect you to do the same stuff in 3 years. Caitlyn, you know what that's like, because the Candle program is the same. And so I got my doctorate, and it was honestly, my doctorate degree was honestly so much fun. I definitely had some of those nights like, what did I get myself into? Especially during the dissertation phase and qualifying exams, but I would not change it for the world. I absolutely loved it. I was the first out-of-state student that Cal State Long Beach admitted, and my department chair at the time, Dr. Ana Ortiz, she basically told me, this is an experiment. We've never admitted anywhere from out of state. And so, you know, make us proud. And so I was like, okay. And so luckily they're still admitting people from out of state. So I think I did all right. But really, I think, you know, as an educator, as a mentor, I kind of find that a little bit weird to say that to think of myself as a mentor, because really I don't think I'm doing anything special. I'm just listening to people. I'm just getting to know people. I'm just being able to support folks. And really I see that as my primary responsibility as an educator, is that yes, I work in the URC and we have students like you all in our programs. And my job and my obligation as an educator is to support all students, regardless if they're coming to me for research or not. Regardless if, like, let's say, you know, we have Discover Davis days and things like that. If a prospective student comes to me and connects with me and they choose to go somewhere else, I'm still going to support that student, right? Because I think that the only way we truly progress as a nation is when we do what Christina Jackson said, and we ask those questions and we discover what we need to discover, and we don't take what people tell us for fact. We always ask those questions. We always remain critical. And the way that I do that, not only in my own work, but in my personal life, I do a lot of work with a nonprofit called Grassroots Law. So I'm still kind of political, using my political science degree. And basically what we do is at Grassroots Law, we are tracking instances of police brutality against unarmed Black and brown folks. And so we're trying to push a database for these atrocities and for these acts of violence, to start to begin to hold police accountable. And so that work is extremely difficult. That work has always been difficult, but has been extremely difficult, mostly within the last 4 or 5 years. But I am grateful that I am able to do it, because I feel like that is my responsibility as a citizen of this society, is to leave it better than when I found it, even if it's hard along the way. So I know I'm over time, but thank you all so much for allowing me to be here. And I look forward to any questions that we might have.
Thank you, E. I really appreciate all of our panelists. And we're going to go a little off script here because I know time is running short. Technically, tonight we're going until 8:30, but I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to hear from our panelists. So we're going to jump right into the Q&A. We do have one more speaker, which is brought to us by way of video. But again, we did want to make sure that you didn't have something else scheduled and wind up not getting to talk to everyone. So right now, if you have questions, you know how we like to do this. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. If you can also introduce yourself, that would be helpful too for this panel. So just state who you are, if you want to a program or whatever, maybe what your year is, and then ask your question. If you don't feel comfortable, you can always drop the question in the chat. So don't be shy, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I have a quick question. My name is Anna, and I'm a biological sciences first-year transfer student. Thank you so much for your insight. I think your stories are very inspiring. And I just wanted to ask, how do you see your work intersecting with like community activism? I know that a couple of panelists talked about this, but I just wanted to highlight it and see what you thought.
Beauty before age, you all.
Well, I was going to say for myself, I approach almost everything I do with art and activism. And for me, choosing this as a career, while it helped me to discover myself, I recognize that for a lot of us, the only way more of us can get through is if we are at the table. And also, I know that several of us talked about the shame that sometimes you feel not knowing or being labeled. And so I think for many of us, I know the relief that I see on students' faces who don't look traditional, even if they don't look exactly like me. They see me and they know, okay, this is a person who has also likely had a different experience with this. And so I think just our visibility, I can't say everybody's visibility, but I think our visibility is one way that, you know, we serve as community activists and get, you know, engaged in the community. And also, we tend to work with a lot of like pipeline programs. So being able to help high school students be able to formulate some of those questions that we didn't even know how to develop at the time when we wanted to go. So I know for myself, that's one way that I get to be connected to the community.
And I think for me, just the study of leadership and just that connection between social justice, socially just leadership, inclusive leadership, there is just this natural coalesce, you know, between activism, advocacy, civic engagement, and leadership. You know, for my own personal leadership philosophy and the contributions that I want to make in my field and in the lives of other people is definitely through civic engagement. And again, you know, concentrating on social justice. And actually the manuscript that I mentioned that we are writing and the research project that we went through with co-inquiry is taking a look at this next phase, right, of leadership education, which is around leadership. The purpose of leadership is for social justice, is for racial justice. And so, you know, so again, I was willing, you know, to go into that uncomfortable space of writing and being all scholarly and, you know, having to talk in academies that I call it, you know, because, you know, of that connection. That's what we need right now. And it is so important. So just as a professional, that's, I feel, how I'm contributing. And then just as a citizen as well, you know, because again, this, you know, embracing the leader in myself, you know, have participated on political campaigns. I would have never have done that before, you know, and so I've been civically engaged in that way. And so I just, again, there's just this, I feel this natural connection between leadership and, again, activism.
I think the only thing I'll add to that is I see the same thing between activism and research. I strongly believe in being a scholar activist or a scholar practitioner, right? If you think of what are we doing in activism, we are trying to provide a counter narrative, or we are fighting to provide a counter narrative to a social issue, right? Or we are bringing light to something that has been historically pushed under the rug or not in our American education system, right? So I think that those are two in the same. And I think that if the pandemic has showed us anything, it has showed us how interconnected our world is, not only physically, but through social issues. And that, regardless of the community you fall into or you identify with, scholar activism and activism in general, there's always something that we can advocate for. So I think that that's what I think.
That's a question for everyone, right?
Sure, if you'd like to answer, feel free.
Okay. I've kind of chosen to be an activist in my daily work because I try to align my interests with my daily work. So when I chose to go into the student affairs profession, it was with reference to really representing Black men in a different light in higher ed, first and foremost. And then I decided to, so my mere presence was not enough for me. I decided to really kind of force institutions to look at their systems that were identifying, look at their systems that were, I guess, perpetuating these myths about Black men. So what I didn't share with you all at the beginning is my dissertation topic currently, I'm a third-year doctoral student at UC Davis. My dissertation topic is looking at Black male retention at UC Davis. So for example, when I said earlier, research is about uncovering truth. The Black male at UC Davis has the lowest graduation rate since 1988. In my opinion, that's not a reflection of Black men. It's a reflection of the system that assesses and evaluates Black men. In many cases, UC Davis is a derivative of many of the educational systems throughout the country and the lens through which we look at all of our students. So when you ask the question, kind of aligning your activism with your work, I've kind of made it my life's commitment to dispel the myth about Black men and to defy these systems by creating new systems. So I didn't mention earlier either that I am the founding director of the Center for African Diaspora Student Success. That's the Black Student Retention Center on UC Davis's campus, and it is the first in the state of California to be designed and created to do so. I do plan on leaving, as E suggested earlier, every space that I leave it better than I inherited. So for you all as scholars, really kind of look at the spaces that you occupy, not just your classrooms, but your neighborhoods, and understand that by passing through that space, you can create a role for yourself in changing that space, if nothing else for the duration of time that you're in it. But everyone has the ability to be a change agent, and it's not an external evaluation or assessment that determines how your change can take place, but rather an internal determinant as to how your change, how you can be the change that the spaces that you occupy need. So that being said, my life's commitment has always been to dispel the myth about Black men, sometimes even creating opportunities to change the way Black men see themselves. I teach a Black male seminar on our campus, and I introduce to these Black men on our campus the history of contributions of Black men, not just to America, but to society in general. So my engineering students, my students that are pre-med, I like to introduce to them their founding fathers who are Black men that established monumental events throughout time. For example, if you're driving down the street, what governs our behavior when we're driving down the street? Traffic lights, right? You can't look at a traffic light beyond this particular zoom, folks. Remember this, the name Garrett Morgan. Garrett Morgan invented the stoplight. He also invented the gas mask, right? So I try to uncover and demystify the contributions of Black men to my students, because many of them, that Black males, have misconceptions of self, just like I did. I thought I could only be an athlete, right, to get to college. I had to dispel that myth by introducing truth, research into my own perception of self, right? So I'm constantly evolving. I do it with my sons. I have two sons. One is a college grad and one is 21, still trying to figure out things for himself. But I try to do that for my own kids, and I do it for my students. But I appreciate that question, and I hope I've been able to answer.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Do we have other questions?
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? Thank you for your insight. Really motivational. My name is Manny. I'm a chemistry major, first generation student, first generation high school graduate, soon to be college graduate, and soon to be graduate student. So my question is, I feel like I identified with a lot of the pieces from your stories. So going into a new stage, like whether it is like graduate school or just whatever's post-graduation, like I think about fitting in. So my question is well, what advice would you give to fit in when you're going to like a new experience somewhere where you're like, you know, against the odds?
Manny, why? Why are you trying to fit in?
Well, because I feel like I'm gonna be somewhere for the next 5 years, so
Yeah,
I want to
yeah.
be comfortable.
Make
I want to
that
be
your own
comfortable.
space. It was more of a hypothetical question. You don't have to fit in anyway. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm sorry I jumped in, y'all, because I know many of you want to contribute to this, but I think that's part of the misconception about the American education system, and it's that you need to conform to spaces. Spaces need to conform to you. Let's be real about that. I'm not about to pay my money and dedicate all this time and reshape my character just because I'm passing through a space for the next 3 to 5 years. That space needs to adjust to me. And the reality is, let me ask you this question. Manny, how long do you plan on living? Give me a number. I want to live till I'm what?
80.
All right. Grad school is 3 to 5 years. Why would you impact the rest of those years just from passing through a space for 3 to 5 years? You'd be like a leaf in the wind, my brother, blowing wherever the wind blows you. How about wherever you end up, sink your heels in, take a stand, and let the environment conform to man. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say, and the last thing I want to say is, your authentic self is good enough. Authentic Emmanuel should be good enough for any space that he enters. And the only thing that should be evolving is your intellect, not your character, not your spirit, but your knowledge. And so from that standpoint, I hope you don't feel like I'm confronting you, but I think it's a very important question because it's a misconception that a lot of students have, even as undergrads. I need to fit in. I shouldn't ask for help. I should do the things like sheep, blind sheep. Don't be the blind sheep. Be the individual. You owe it to yourself to be authentic.
Hey, thanks, man. That really means a lot.
Christina, you look like you had something you wanted to say.
Oh, I had a lot. You know, part of me would echo so many of Caitlyn's sentiments, but I also hear your question in a different way. And I hear you saying, it's not so much that I don't know I belong here. It's the fact that other people know I don't, or other people assume I don't belong here. And what are some things that I can do to demonstrate that I do belong here? Because there are so many things for them that say that I don't. And I will tell you that for people who are in college, when you know, UC Davis is a huge campus. So you don't need everybody there, right? You need a little quality. You don't need a lot of quantity. And so I would say what ends up happening as you discover your intellectual interests, you will find yourself in networks and circles with other people who also have those interests. And that is where you start to find that sense of belonging that comes from within, right? I'll give an example. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was going to go to an event with one of my friends, and we showed up and we were the only two people there. And she was like, I don't know if we should go. Ain't nobody else here. And I was like, well, if we came, we would only be talking to each other anyway. So would it matter that everybody else was here, right? And so I would implore you, Emmanuel, just to change your perspective. If people have seen me on campus, I know my executive director has seen me dancing to my office on campus. And we have all heard the quote, dance like no one is watching. Or dance, yeah, I dance like people are watching. I know people like to see me. They like to watch me. They like things that are different. And I don't mind giving them something that's different. Also, there's a ton of students on campus who are dying to have somebody be themselves and to see someone being themselves. And as an educator, to me, everything that I do must be culturally responsive. So it's not just about like, you know, showing to them that you can go to school to be somebody else. I talk to students in my regular vernacular because I want them to know, like, having a master's degree is great. It's not, however, the thing that defines me. It's like that little thing you got to throw out because everybody else be forgetting just because you got a little flavor, you know, that means the intellect is lacking. It's not, you know, and so I think what Caitlyn is trying to say is bring all of that because it's what we all need to learn from. And, you know, more than anything, you will give other people permission to belong and you will feel like you belong because of that. I signed into this room today and saw all these people together who I've seen in other spaces. And it validates for me that I've become the type of community activist and person that I want to be because I see these other people in this room who are doing things that I think are really amazing. This is one way that I know, you know, I've arrived. Being me is what got me here. So being you is going to get you into the places you want to be.
You guys are great. Thank you so much.
So do we have questions from anyone else? Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
I saw a hand from Antoinette.
Antoinette?
Okay, call me out. Well, good evening, everyone. I am so privileged to be here to listen to everyone's words. It's just kind of like do, 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 do. And so anyways, my name is Antoinette Banks. I am a transfer student from Los Angeles City College. I am a mother to a fantastic and phenomenal teenager. I'm an author, I'm a McNair scholar, and now emerging scholar in camp. Shout out to Miss Lolita. I just finished my URC research, which is incredible. Thank you, E. Not only that, I'm now a founder of a SaaS company created to help special needs students achieve their goals by providing quality tracking and predictive analytics of students' individualized educational plan. So the reason why I said all of that, and I emailed some of y'all here today too, was I would love to hear your perspective because it seems that you guys are trailblazers. You're in moving forward with a lot of what I call archer weight, right? Like if you are an archer and you trying to point towards a target, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of tension and all that stuff. So I've had conversations to confront myself and to talk to other faculty mentors and things like that. and I say all this stuff that I'm doing and how I won't stop and I can't stop. And I feel in the intersection between halfway on fire and maybe a little bit, who knows, just a sprinkle of craziness, right? You kind of need that. And so what I was told back to me was, why do you have to do so much work that 3 people could be doing? That's number one. And then number 2 was, maybe you have imposter syndrome. That's why you're trying to do so much. So I said to that person, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, so I hope it doesn't come across that way, but I said to them, I can't be an imposter if I'm trying to do what others haven't done, and it's an institutional thing and not on me. So I do think that's valid, but it's not valid for me. So I would love to hear your incredible perspective of how did you sort of weed out that stuff, stay focused beyond knowing what your circle should be, but just more or less of, where are the leaders? Where do the leaders go? Where are they, so that you're not having, well, for me in particular, not telling, Antoinette, calm down. You don't need to do too much, because that's not, I feel like I need to do more. So talk to me.
So I think number one, burnout is real, right? So I think there's definitely a balance. And I think you are 1,000% correct in that you are doing what is right for Antoinette, right? And can't nobody figure what that thing is other than you, right? So for me, because my fiance tells me the same thing. E, you're doing too much. E, how can you take on another mentee? E, how can you take on another volunteer shift? E, how can you do all of this? And part of me feels like, if I don't, then who will, right? And I need to also have those people in my life who are going to tell me what I need to hear and not what I want to hear, right? Like, if I am truly taking away from my own mental health, my own wellness, am I really going to be that valuable, or as valuable as I could be to that movement or cause or whatever, right? So I think it really is a reflection, an internal reflection of being able to say, like, am I 10 toes down? Am I doing all right? And if you're not, then being willing, what that leader in you says should do is being willing to ask for help, right? But I strongly believe that parents in general, have superpowers. So I think that part of that is maybe just your superpower as being a mom and being an awesome, right? And so I think it's important to have those people in your life that will not be like, Antoinette, you're doing too much, right? But that will be like, Antoinette, I'm a little worried. Like, maybe let's talk about, like, how are you really doing, right? Like, how are you doing as a person, right? Not as a student, not as a mother, not as a new business person, right? Or a scholar, but you as an individual, as a human, how are you doing, right? And as long as you have those people in your life, and that they're going to be literally 100 with you, even if you get, your feelings a little hurt, then I think you're going to be all right, right? And the best advice my counselor always gave me was, can't nobody drive you crazy if you don't give them the keys, right? Just remember that. Can't nobody drive you crazy if you don't give them the keys.
I know we're running close on time. I just also want to throw out there thinking about how we are also defining what and who a leader is, right? Because leadership is not always about being in that designated position, that formal position, being the most vocal, being the most, involved and busy. We have to think about, maybe we're not seeing the leadership because of the lens of how we're defining what a leader is. There's a concept called bridge leadership, where it's leadership that is more in the background. They're bridging people, bridging communities, bridging ideas, and they're kind of floating in and out to help create momentum, to be catalysts, to help get things moving. And sometimes, you know, then that's just one example. Sometimes we don't see that because the way we're conditioned to think of what a leader is. So that would be another thing to really think and reflect on that, because maybe there are more leaders around you, but maybe, you know, depending on how you're defining leadership, maybe, you know, you're not seeing them in this moment, you know, in that particular moment. I want to commend you and congratulate you as well for all that you're accomplishing. It's so amazing.
I wanted to throw 2 cents in there for Antoinette. I heard a lot of questions in your questions, so I'm going to try to answer as best I can. But one thing that has changed for me as I've gotten older, you mentioned about imposter syndrome, and I am a proponent of people investigating the 5 types of imposter syndrome and checking out, you know, where they find things that resonate with them. To your point, I do recognize that a lot of the frameworks that are developed don't take into account marginalized populations. And so sometimes that's why we're less likely to use them. But I will say I use the 5 types of imposter syndrome because I've read The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women by the author. And I think that, you know, her points are very authentic. And I also think that they're not like jargonish. They're things that you can even like explain to high school students because I've used it with them. One of the things that I have had to change about myself to not have that burnout, E mentioned, you know, I do it because if I don't do it, who's going to do it? Well, yeah, to some extent, but I also want us to recognize that we have many different roles. You, for example, shared about 7 different, you know, identities that you hold, and each of those identities deserves some of that 168 hours that you have. It's not fair, and it does not give your life balance to give 150 hours to being one person and then leaving 10 or 15 hours left for something else, right? That certainly is going to cause you to not be able to have the focus and concentration necessary to not necessarily feel that burnout. Often we feel like because we're moving, we're going somewhere. Movement is just movement. It's not action. And so for myself, I take time weekly to look back at my week and think about, did my time define how I like to show up? You know, I like to show up as an organized person. What did I do last week to invest in my identity as an organized person? So I think that for some of us, we have to like, you know, not necessarily, you know, give into this, I'm a strong Black anything, so I'm gonna put everything on my back. We are not robots, we're not machines. You know, we cannot do that. And so I would just say, you know, really recognizing what your passions and purpose is, but also knowing that if you aren't healthy, there is nothing that information is going to do to serve anyone. And so really thinking about how to divide your time to be all of the different things that you want to be able to be.
Thank you so much. And that is a great note to end on. We've gone slightly past the time, but I want to thank all of our panelists who joined us today. We will have the recording available. We'll post it on our website, or we'll send it out to you via email. So if we can, just give a virtual applause to everyone here, or feel free to unmute yourself to say thank you, whatever you're comfortable with. So thank you very much. And we hope that you can join us next week for our panel, and I will be sending out information via email. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you to our guests, and we appreciate you very, very much. Bye-bye.